Namaskar Yokar and welcome to yet another episode of Page Turner. It's festive season here in Goa, and before we move ahead, I would like to wish all our viewers a very happy Christmas and a very happy New Year in advance. Today we are going to speak about poetry which is written by a Goan but which is not about Goa. We are going to speak about poetry from Delhi, and to speak about his poems we have with us Dr. Brian Mendonca. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And Brian, this poetry was written since 1998.
Exactly.
And you have written another two books of poems.
Yes.
But I would want to ask you, do you think these poems are still relevant today? Because they start from the 90s and then we move on to the 2000 era. So how relevant are these poems today?
I think poetry is timeless. And this is a question that I asked myself before publishing it. I said, Brian, if nobody picks up the books, what are you going to do? I said, this is a risk that I will take, not only because my love affair with Delhi still continues,
True.
but also because I think the poems written in 99, 2000, they are an essential part of me.
True.
They have made me what I am today. Poems like Traveler, poems like Andhi, they are part of my being. And to understand my work more completely, I think people should read this volume before the rest.
Right. And like you said, Brian, you have lived in Delhi, you have lived your youthful years in Delhi.
Yes.
And many a times what happens is when a person leaves his hometown,
Right.
you tend to get nostalgic.
Absolutely.
You tend to take your memories of your hometown, of your childhood, wherever you go. So did these memories, did this nostalgia overpower you any time in your writings? You have of course written about Goa for sure. But how did you manage to sink in the depths of Delhi and write these poems?
That's such a beautiful question. I think I take my inspiration from that beautiful Konkani phrase, "Phul na pakle." If you cannot be a flower, be a petal.
Yeah.
So I think I wanted to contribute in my own way to documenting my stay in Delhi. I believe that my life was a testimonial, as a poet. And my interaction with those experiences would be valuable later on.
True.
But when I was writing it, I didn't expect that I would see a day when it was all completed.
Right.
And the thing is that all three volumes and the poems that were contained in it were going concurrently.
Okay. So you wrote them together and then decided to segregate them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because poetry happens in chaos.
True.
You cannot say I'm writing this one for Delhi and that one for Goa.
Very true. Very true.
It's all over the place.
True, very true. And I was actually going to ask you the same thing, whether you actually sat down and wrote about Delhi, or did they just flow by?
I think this is linked to your earlier question about, if I can rephrase it, is how did you find your meaning in Delhi?
Right.
It was very difficult in the beginning because it is a place where you have to survive on your own. But you see, that aloneness gave me the strength to put my words on paper.
True.
And you will read that poem, I Am Not Alone. It's a
Very
classic.
true. Yes.
And now my students are looking at that poem and saying, sir, very nice. So, you see, they are identifying with that aspect of me when I was as young as them.
Very true. Very
So
true.
I feel the poet has to continue writing throughout his age and career, right up till the sunset years.
True.
Because he's experiencing different things at different times.
Very true.
I need perhaps to say that those, poems of desire may not be written right now, but they still were relevant and important at that time.
True. But I would like to disagree with you when you say that, some poems and some feelings for that matter are timeless. And I would say, Brian, you must be really romantic at heart, because I read your poem about this the dentist that you observe, and I found it so amazing because I dread dentist. I still fear going to a dentist, clinic. And thankfully now I have a dentist friend, so it's little easier. But to actually sit on that table and think of a poem like this, I want you to talk about that poem, but I want you to read that poem for our viewers once and then talk about that poem.
Let me tell you a little about the editorial aspect of this poem. Since the collection is presumably titled Jasmine City, Poems from Delhi, sometimes I think it is not. Because several of the poems are standalone poems like
True,
this one.
exactly.
But the fact is, they qualify because they were written in Delhi, and they're about Delhi.
Yeah.
So when I was putting these little, footnotes, I felt that after reading this poem, if a footnote was not there, I would be misunderstood. So that is why I put Oris Dental Care Center, and this is how it goes. Your auburn hair dances in the focus light as your gloved fingers explore my mouth. The rasp of rubber on rubber plays counterpoint to the hum of a myriad probing things, while I lie supine below your gaze in the welter of a space afterward.
Wonderful. I still cannot imagine the sound that usually irritates the patients can actually get you through a poem. That's wonderful, Brian. And like you said, most of your poems have the places written there. So when I read all the poems, when I read this poetry book, I thought I am reading a poetic traveler.
Right.
Because it has different kinds of places to say about monuments, it speaks about history, it speaks about food. So was there an intention to document Delhi as a place?
That, let's say, prerogative was felt more in my Goa collection because I'm rooted in Goa, and when I see the erasure of certain ways of life and certain forms of beauty, I am hurt by it. That's why Last Bus to Vasco is about that, that trail or that journey which no longer happens.
True.
So it was more, I would say, obvious and more decided for the Goa poems.
Right.
But the Delhi poems happened as a, backdrop, as a takeoff, because I suppose I was already writing in that style. And I didn't push myself to say this is going to be documenting Delhi, but I was genuinely interested in Delhi's history, like 1321.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
and of course, the Battle of Samugarh.
Right.
So I try to weave in Delhi's history in the poems I write to make perhaps history more attractive and make poetry a vehicle for history.
Right, and it has been made attractive because you tend to then go back to history, then tend to find a little more about history that you have tried to say in your poems. Brian, recently we had an episode with Dr. Rajay Pawar, and Rajay writes poetry in Konkani, and I asked Rajay, he uses English very effortlessly in his poems, and I asked him, did anyone ever taunt you or ask you why you use English words? He said, it's very obvious, otherwise it wouldn't stand the test of time. You use Hindi so effortlessly in your poems. One of the poems is entirely in Hindi, Shatabdi. So are we in times when, this intermingling of languages is, the in thing, or we cannot do away with these things now?
I think, again, the decision is not conscious. You don't write poetry, poetry is written by you. Means there is an external agency that writes itself.
Exactly.
So sometimes the objective correlative or the idiom comes to you in Hindi.
Right.
So I'm not going to mess with that inspiration. If it has come in Hindi, मैं तो Hindi में ही लिखूंगा. And for example, the poem Andhi.
Yeah.
The title was Aandhi, but it's originally written in Devanagari.
Oh, nice.
So I told my typesetter, no, I want it that way.
Yeah.
Then Shiv Pelwan Baba, also in Hindi.
Absolutely.
So, जब हम हिंदी में लिखते हैं ना, you are embracing a different cosmos, a different world view.
Absolutely.
And जब हिंदी में मैं शामिल करता हूँ कविता में, तो दोनों what is it, worlds, what is worlds in Hindi? दोनों जगत शामिल हो जाते हैं और समेट जाते हैं.
Absolutely, and we see that happening in your poetry so beautifully. Brian, one of the very important things of this poetry book is its illustrations. Lovely illustrations, lovely cover, of course. So is it the illustrator's credit all together, or did you have any role to play in that?
This is the journey of a very dear friend of mine, Kalol Majumdar, who I met during my Oxford days.
Okay.
And we continued this relationship, and he's still a very good friend sitting in Kolkata.
Oh, okay.
And since I was venturing into my first volume in Goa, I wanted to deal with people I could trust. So मैंने बताया कि देखो आपको करना ही है.
Yeah.
And he said, Brian, I've never illustrated a poetry book.
Oh, okay.
He's a specialist in children's work.
Oh, okay. So this is the first
This
book
is his
then.
first
Oh,
poetry book,
nice.
and he was overjoyed at it.
Yeah.
The full credit goes to him
Yeah.
for his drawings.
Yeah.
But we did have some kinds of interactions where I told him that this is what I intended in my poem, and in terms of your illustrations, maybe this could be done. And for historical figures, I sent him what do you call it, artwork reference.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
But he has done a brilliant
Zinatul
job.
Masajid,
Okay.
that beautiful mosque,
right,
the way
right,
he has
right.
done, the detailing
yes,
is exactly the same. If you go there, you'll see it.
Very true, very
Yeah.
true. And as it is, they say that it is difficult to interpret poetry, and to interpret and put it in drawings. He's done a brilliant job.
Yes.
Brian, I just want to ask you about two poems that interest me, and both these poems are titled with dates.
Yeah.
So 15th August and 7th October, and 15th August has just 3 words. So it's really very difficult to kind of interpret. So if you would want to tell our viewers about these two poems.
I would like to answer this question at a tangent, because if I look at my poetic growth, I was very reader friendly in my first volume, Last Bus to Vasco, and I gave dhar sare notes and this and that. As I wrote my second volume, Piece of India, it didn't have notes, and you see the style was more cerebral, it was more stoic.
Okay.
And now in this volume I say, no, my reader base is assured and I want to challenge them even more. तो इसी प्रकार मैंने ये दो कविता लिखा है. And the story behind 15th August is that जो कवि जो है ना वो हटके लिखना चाहिए. He should not really say whatever is obvious, otherwise what's the point of him being a poet? And particularly in Delhi there is this kind of hype, 15th August, 15th August. And during that time and during that year, the key to the poems is to look at the year when it was written, and there is a section which gives the exact year.
Yeah.
So in that year there were 3 unnatural deaths,
and
I felt that we need to notice them, have a discussion about them, and not just get lost in the hysteria of praise.
Very true.
So it is Dhananjay is a very famous case about that rape in Kolkata, and he was, I think, in prison for around 14 years, and then he was hanged. And till the last he said, I did not do it.
Yeah.
Pushkin was about a gay who was stabbed about 30-40 times in a locality pretty close to mine, but I think in GK2, and it probably was by a jealous lover. But I'm trying to say that don't normalize normality.
Right.
There are so many lives which are different, which you don't want to see, which you don't want to accept as other.
True.
And the last one is Nafisa,
Yeah,
the model from Bombay who committed suicide. Why?
Yeah.
All of these were young lives, they were snuffed out, and still, where's 15th August?
Yeah.
So, if you're going to, what you call homogenize a nation, you also need to see where it departs from the norm.
Right, true. And your title speaks so much. Like for example, 15 August, the poetry starts from the title,
Yes,
and then
it
you
flows.
move on. Then you move on to the actual poem.
May I interrupt
Sure,
you?
sure, please.
Oh, the first book, right?
Yeah.
Was Last Bus to Vasco, and when I read it in Baroda, then I read it in Kutch. There was a friend of mine, and as I started reading, he put his hand up. I said, yeah, he was a Gujarati. He said, Brian, क्या title है? Last Bus to Vasco, गया तो गया. And life is about that.
Very true.
Life is about that.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And I was actually going to ask you about the response that you got, because you cater to different kind of generations. You have your students are young, you have other readers who would be of different ages. So how has been the response to the poetry, to the earlier books also, and to Delhi, especially in Goa now?
It's very ironic that my book on Goa was published in Delhi. and my book on Delhi was published in Goa, it's a reciprocal arrangement. But it's also
nice,
because of my background in publishing in some of the premier publishing houses from which I've learned so much, like Oxford and Cambridge and Britannica. They have contributed to my knowledge of publishing. That's why I bring it out with such confidence.
Yes.
But as far as the response is concerned, both my earlier volumes are out of print and not available.
Great.
And the first one went into a reprint, the second one is sold out.
Okay.
So I think that speaks for itself, and despite the obvious lukewarm attitude towards poetry, if you believe in yourself and you believe that your words are actually a reflection of what someone else is feeling,
Very true.
it's we are going to go for a reprint for this one also.
Yes.
The first 100 books are already flown off the shelves. So there are 4 waiting, and it's your commitment. I feel as an artist, it's how you're committed to poetry and to make it happen when you feel that there's nothing in front of you.
Very true, and we really hope that it goes for a reprint because they are such lovely poems. And before we wrap up the show, I want to ask you 3 poetry books already.
Yes.
What next?
I think one of the most central questions is that all these books are self-published. So for those people out there who feel that, I'm getting so many rejections and people don't even want to see me, don't worry, because nobody can take that poetry away from you. Someday somebody will come along like a messiah and publish it. We can do it. So what next, I think, is what life has to decide. I'm on very different pages when each of these books were published.
Right.
I'm publishing this now when I have a family and I'm here in Goa. And I think it's the universe which will always tell you what you want to do and what you have to do.
Yes, and we are really looking forward to that call of universe.
Yes.
And before we end the show, I would certainly want you to read one of the poems, one of your favorites maybe from the book for our viewers.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's a question that is often asked, but you spoke to me about 7th October, which I didn't really reply.
Yeah.
7th October is my birthday.
Oh,
and it's always on that day that I ask myself, so what are you doing here in this world? Are you fulfilling your destiny? And sometimes those answers are not available, and I say, no, it's okay. Chaos is what creates poetry. So, in order to make Delhi work for me, I stayed there 9 years. What I used to do, I used to itemize what I was doing at every moment of the day. And the weekends were the worst because there was so much of time.
Yes,
and that's when, on a Friday, I would take a train and go off
and
somewhere
travel.
to India, somewhere in India, and write my collection, Piece of India, Poems in Transit.
Right.
But if I was landlocked in Delhi, what was I doing? And then when I wrote it down and I read it later, I reflected on the fact that no, I'm not so useless. So I'll just read this Indian Sunday because it encapsulates Delhi's world and how I made it work for me and how it was possible to bring this out. Okay, so it's called Indian Sunday because I think the tragedy of our life is sometimes that we don't know what to do with our leisure.
Very true. Very true.
With a copy of Yana's Yashodhara Karite, I set out at 6 to hear Rag Lalit. On a munch fringed with crotons sat Chaurasya, in the shade of a neem playing Krishna's flute.
Wow.
At 10, I rested in the Mehman Khana of the Lodhis, as the Shish Gumbad towered over mortality. For a table of dal, raita, hot rotis, aloo, I supped with Sanjay and his wife and his 2 little daughters. As the desert cooler beguiles the sultry noon, I returned to my dwelling, dropped by Sanjay on his scooter, and catch up with the Times of India and Jana's Queen. A little bit of dusting, a little bit of washing, and the breezes mellow into Ghulam Ali's world. कभी किताबों में फूल रखना, कभी दरख्तों पे नाम लिखना.
Wow, beautiful, Brian. And I really hope we get to read more and more from you. and I hope we have another episode of Page Turners soon.
I would certainly like that.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us on Page Turner, and thank you to our viewers for joining us on yet another episode of Page Turner. Keep following Reads and Books, keep following Palash Agni Studios, and best wishes for the season again. Please take care of yourselves during these times, and let's meet in the new year soon. Thank you.